The Upsweep. Remember last July when the ocean was on fire in the Gulf of Mexico due to a gas leak and we all watched like, what's going on? What is this? Why is there a hole to hell? Just all of a sudden it appeared. Well, 5 hours later, the company resumed pumping gas again. So sometimes when the ocean screams at us, we have to listen. Even if we're not exactly sure what it is we're hearing. Sound travels much faster underwater than it does in air, more than 4 times as fast. You ever crack your knuckles underwater? Try it when you get a chance. Sounds like a war zone underneath there. See, because sound travels so quickly, it's hard to find out where the signals or events are happening in the deep sea. The Upsweep is an unidentified sound that was heard throughout the entire Pacific Ocean. Again, quite loud. When the Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory fired up its sound surveillance system back in 1991, these sounds were heard. This sound happens in real time as well. It's not sped up or altered in any way. These upsweeping sounds last a few seconds each ping. The source was roughly located around New Zealand and South America, and it peaks around autumn and spring. So whatever it is, well, it's probably hibernating. Number 9, shifting plates. I remember this back in 2013. I hope this rings a bell for some of you watching. In 2013, a woman in British Columbia, over in Canada, heard a trumpet sound, a low, slow, like a trumpet, or so she thought. At first, nothing came from these claims or videos, just a few comments saying, that's weird, which it is. But then it started to happen in areas all over the world, from Texas to Norway, so something's going on. It's the same slow, loud trumpet sound. Well, it turns out this sound was coming from the ocean this whole time. Because again, in 2018, a little more recently, the same low-pitched humming noise was heard in Hawaii, Kenya, and then Chile. So what we're hearing all these years are shifting tectonic plates. That's our best guess at this point. Undersea volcanoes, sure, just moving some deep-sea furniture around. It's gotta be loud. Some folk believe that there's another dimension underneath the ocean floor, so maybe this is just a door opening and closing. Maybe this is the bouncer being like, oh, come on in, okay. Either way, I'm good here on land, never going down there. Number 8, quacker. Quaker Oats, the quacker. Not to be confused with the Kraken, he's a little bit different. This is the quacker. A loud quack was heard during the Cold War, so a little bit older. It was recorded while Soviet Navy ballistic missile submarines were heading through North Atlantic and Arctic waters. They heard quacking or ribbit, something like some sort of deep sea duck. Whenever submarines passed a certain area, this loud quack would come from deep below, and it came from an object that was moving around. That's the mysterious part. That's why we threw it on our list today. The Soviets thought they were overhearing secret US tech, you know, like I guess some deep sea duck radar. I've heard rumors of that one. That's good. That was in a James Bond movie for sure. Scientists believe that it came from a giant squid, which is somehow more alarming than the ocean floor. Number 7, underwater underworld. Back in 2018, a diver was exploring flooded caves in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. They were on the beach having a good time, then they saw this opening about 1.5 feet wide, barely enough to fit one person, and this diver was like, They went through. That's terrifying. First of all, bravo, hats off, that's extremely brave. But then they found this underwater tunnel that connected the Saskatoon Cave and the Dos Ojos cave system. So this is a huge discovery. Because now this is considered one of the largest underwater cave systems in the world. In total, it runs about 347 kilometers long. I can't even fathom how long that is underwater. This cave has been untouched since the last ice age, rightfully so. And the 200 pockets inside are filled with bones, Mayan altars, fossils belonging to now extinct animals. It's basically a time capsule from 15,000 years ago. So if you're diving through small cave entrances, you know, don't go alone, or you might get stuck in time, apparently. Or you might find thousands of bones, or a possible entrance to the underworld. Yeah, that's also a hot rumor for this underwater Mayan cave system. I forgot my flippers. Can't go, sorry guys. Have fun though, sounds like a great time. Number 6, Titan Ocean. This one is literally out of this world. Coming from one of the many moons of Saturn, Titan, around 10 years ago, NASA's Cassini spacecraft detected water underneath its massive shell of ice. That's pretty exciting. To quote a Cassini team member, the search for water is an important goal in solar system exploration, and now we've spotted another place where it's abundant. NASA has also detected low-frequency radio waves on this moon before, so perhaps there's something going on under the space sea. Our own ocean is mysterious enough, let alone receiving signals from an ocean in space. No thanks, I don't want to even think about what's up there. Number 5, The Kraken. Jack Sparrow's worst nightmare. Is it real? Is the Kraken actually a real thing? Where does this come from? Well, maybe. The giant squid is not that far-fetched. Some creatures in the ocean are massive as is, like for example, this manta ray off the coast of Trinidad. If the internet didn't exist and I saw this in real life, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. So of course, many sailors reported seeing the Kraken at one point or another. The ocean's terrifying. For ages now, sailors specifically from Norway and Greenland have all continued to share eyewitness reports of a giant sea monster, the Kraken. Apparently it had tentacles big enough to pull you and your mateys right off of the ship. In 1857, Danish naturalist Pegasus Steenstrup found a large squid beak, and then soon after he was sent parts of another specimen from the Bahamas, so people were trying to help him out. So he concluded with all these gross puzzle pieces that the Kraken is real, and it's part of a species of giant squid called Architeuthis dux, which is Latin for ruling squid. Very little is known about giant squids, seeing as they're so hard to track, but we did get a photo of one back in 2005 and a video of one in 2013. Number 4, the whistle. If you can whistle, honestly, enjoy it. I've been trying for years. All I got is the one note. I'm like a bird. My lips are way too dry and weak, apparently. Nothing like this whistle, recorded in July 1997. This whistle was picked up by one hydrophone, meaning that scientists now can't pinpoint its location in the ocean, so we have no idea where it came from. But it was very loud, so we heard it. Somewhere in the Pacific, just, you know, somewhere out there. Good luck, just listen. That's terrifying. What do you think this is, really? The NRAA has compared the sound to volcanic activity, but because it could have come from literally anywhere, it could have been an iceberg, it could have been hydrothermal vents, it could have been the Kraken. Who knows? What do you think? Number 3, the green flash. I watch way too many superhero movies, so this next one had me pacing around my living room for a hot minute. Who is this? Who is this guy? Who's this green flash man? The green flash phenomena happens in the ocean. So far, we've only observed the flash above water, but I'm sure there's some mysterious happenings going on below, you know? I'm sure there's a few confused fish over there when it happens. This happens during sunset and sunrise. Best time to see the green flash is on a clear evening over water, and the air must be clean. So if you're in a polluted city, you're like, damn it. The reason we see a green flash is because of our boy, Roy G. Biv. This is the G in Roy G. Biv. Sunlight reflects off the atmosphere like a big old prism, and in turn, for thousands of years, humans have probably been like, what was that? I just saw a green flash. I keep seeing it every night. What is going on? They're probably so confused for thousands of years. No, it's not a Justice League villain. It's just the sunset. Number 2, HMS Daedalus. This 19th century warship belonged to the Royal Navy. It was this big class beauty equipped with 19 guns, and it launched at Woolwich Dockyard in 1844. It was a big deal. 4 years later, Captain McEway, along with his officers and crew, all set sail to St. Helena, but during their commute, they were visited. Yeah, this is why we have the guns on the side of the ship. If any trouble comes along, be it pirates, whatever the case, we're now equipped. Thing is, this visitor didn't come from the sides or the front or the back, it came from below, in the form of a 60-foot long serpent. And it hung around for 20 minutes, apparently, with its head breaking the surface of the water occasionally. The captain said it was so close under the ship that if it was one of his own crew members under there, he could have easily recognized their face. That's how clear the water was. It wasn't choppy or cloudy, it was a normal day otherwise. So do we think 60-foot long sea snakes exist? Who's to say? I mean, considering this list, I'd say yeah. We barely explored our own ocean. And finally, number 1, the Milky Sea phenomenon. This one you can see from space, so we're leaving the biggest and brightest for last, folks. The Milky Sea phenomenon was first observed back in 1864 by Captain Raphael Semmes. Captain Raphael Semmes journaled it aboard his CSS Alabama. He wrote about passing from the deep blue waters into a patch of water so bright that it startled him. The whole face of nature seemed to change, and with a little stretch of imagination, the Alabama might have been conceived to be a phantom ship lighted up by the sickly and unearthly glare of a phantom sea. That's not an exaggeration as well. This phenomena is something out of Avatar, really. It's so alien-like. Bioluminescence is part of the reason for this ghostly bright blue appearance, but sailors say there is something sinister about it as well. To this day, we don't fully understand how bioluminescence works, but it's continuing to blow our minds. For example, we just discovered a new shark. We just found a glowing shark. A glowing shark. What is happening here? The Milky Sea phenomenon is bigger than a glowy shark, and it can span around 100,000 square miles, so you'll see it. If it's around, you'll probably see it. It lasts for a few nights too, so I don't blame these sailors for getting spooked out. In 2005, we got low orbit satellites to snap a pic of this phenomenon, but even so, we don't fully understand why it happens. But we're trying our best.
Coming in at number 10 is the Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle covers about 500,000 square miles of ocean off the southeastern tip of Florida. It's a section of the Atlantic Ocean roughly bounded by Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, where dozens of ships and airplanes have disappeared. Unexplained circumstances surround this area, area, as it's known that compasses have malfunctioned here back when Christopher Columbus was sailing the world. Now, some speculate that unknown and mysterious forces account for the unexplained disappearances, such as extraterrestrials capturing humans for study, the influence of the lost continent of Atlantis, and vortexes that suck objects into other dimensions. There have been so many planes and ships that have gone missing over the area, with people on them suddenly just going poof. Now, where did all those people go? I think to another dimension. Number 9, the Gates of Guinea. According to voodoo mythology, the newly dead are sent to a kind of purgatory before traveling to meet their ancestors in the deep waters. Known as Guinea, this realm is presided over by the notorious Loa, who goes by the name of Baron Samedi. There are tales of voodoo practitioners opening the Gates of Guinea to reclaim the souls of the dead. Now, souls in this lost land are considered to be at high risk from hoodoo magicians who have the power to reanimate them as zombies. Yeah. Zombies. While some followers of voodoo interpret the 7 gates as a spiritual metaphor, others believe them to exist in the physical realm. Now, one of these stories locates the gates in New Orleans. To enter Guinea, it is said that one must open the 7 gates in the correct order. Each successive gate is presided over by one of the Loa of Death, who must be appeased with the appropriate offerings. Now, although the exact location of the gates have never been disclosed, there have been suggestions over the years that the clue may lie in the Vive, or summoning signal of Baron Samedi himself. Appearing as a crucifix surmounted by 7 stars, the symbol might be a map of some kind and once aligned over the crossroads of Canal Street and Bazin Street in the city's French Quarter, as the stars of the Veve seem to fall on notable surrounding cemeteries. Number 8, the Alaska Triangle. This remote area is infamous for alien abductions, Bigfoot sightings, and paranormal phenomena and vanishing airplanes. Like much of Alaska, the triangle contains some of the most rugged, unforgiving wilderness in North America. It's an impossible vast expanse of dense forests, craggy mountain peaks, alpine lakes, and large swaths of plain old wilderness. Now, with all this, it's no shock that people go missing. What is surprising, however, is the sheer number of people who go missing. Add to the fact that many disappear without a shred of evidence, and bodies, alive or dead, are rarely found. More than 16,000 people, including airplane passengers, hikers, locals, and tourists, have disappeared within the Alaska Triangle since 1988. The rate per 1,000 people is more than twice the national missing person average, and the rate of people who are never found is even higher. Now, the numbers don't lie, and they imply that something else is going on here than people merely getting lost in the mountains. Is it a portal taking people to another world? I think so. Number 7, HOSA Castle. The HOSA Castle is located in the forest north of Prague and is one of the most haunted places in the world. According to the legend, on this exact spot, there was a huge hole in the ground that was considered to be the gateway to hell. Paranormal activities were disturbing the region, and the Bohemians thought they would solve their problems if they covered the hole, so that's why they built the castle. Now, no one actually wanted to build this castle and get close to the portal, so they used prisoners to help. Hundreds of prisoners were forced to go into the pit to build the foundation for the castle. However, when they were taken out of the hole, they all looked like old men. The first prisoner lasted only a few seconds before he began screaming. When he was pulled back up, the story goes, his hair had turned white, and it seemed like he'd aged 30 years, and he babbled incoherently about half-human creatures who flapped through the darkness of grotesque wings. Now, today, witnesses report several different forms of paranormal activities, and some even claim that the site contains remains of demonic beasts who escaped from the pit. Number 6, Gate of the Sun. Believed by some to be a portal to the land of the gods, the Gate of the Sun in Bolivia shares much of its legends with other similar sites. Tiwanaku is a city said to be one of the most important sites of ancient America, with legends stating that the sun god Viracocha appeared in Tiwanaku and made it the place of creation, the place he chose to start the human race. Carved from one block of stone and thought to be 14,000 years old, the gateway displays what appears to be human beings with rectangular helmets. Now, this has led many researchers to state the purpose of the gate is indeed connected to something astronomical. The top middle of the arch features a carving of the supposed sun god and shows what looks to be rays of light appearing behind and forcing their way all around all sides of the deity's head. Although it now stands upright, when it was found by European explorers in the mid-1800s, it was said to have been lying horizontally. It also appears to have a large crack on the top right of the arch, and it is unknown how this happened. Number 5, Sedona Vortexes. Vortexes. Sedona, a small town in Arizona, was once known by the Native American tribes as Nawanda, and at one time the most sacred city to them. It is said that the red rocks of the desert that surround the small town can create vortexes with the capability of transporting people to another realm or dimension. Native Americans believe that these rocks were spiritually charged, while sounds emanating from them have been reported. In the 1950s, a local tribesman was aiding treasure hunters who were searching for gold in the mountains. He told them a story of his people, dating it back to the 1800s, of three tribesmen who had discovered the archway while riding in the desert. The story goes that when one of them walked through, he simply disappeared. The helpful tribesman stated he had also seen a strange incident at the alleged doorway. While out in the desert, a sudden rainstorm hits the area and turned the skies gray with clouds. Now, as he turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of the archway and saw that the skies through the arch were clear blue. He walked closer to it, seeing that the archway's image of the mountain range was the same and the only difference was the sky. However, he too became scared, mounted his horse, and returned home. Number 4. The Bennington Triangle. Located in the southwestern part of Vermont, this landlocked triangular area is notorious for a string of unexplained disappearances that occurred there. Between 1945 and 1950, 5 people disappeared in the Bennington Triangle. Now, the shocking thing is 4 out of the 5 missing people were never found. The only person found was Frida Langer. On October 28, 1950, Frida and her cousin Herbert Elsner left their family campsite near the Somerset Reserve to go on a hike. During the journey, she slipped and fell into a stream, and she told Herbert if he would wait, she would go back to the campsite, change clothes, and catch up to him. Now, when she did not return, Herbert made his way back to the campsite and discovered that Frida had not returned and that nobody had seen her since they left. Over the next 2 weeks, 5 searches were conducted involving aircraft, helicopters, and up to 300 searchers. No trace of Frida was found during the search, and then on May 12, 1951, Frida's body was found 3.5 miles from the campsite in the eastern branch of the Deerfield River, an area that had been searched 7 months previously. No cause of death could be determined because of the condition of her remains, and it appears that the Bennington Triangle will always remain a mystery. Number 3. The Stanley Hotel. The Stanley Hotel is a 140-room colonial revival hotel about 5 miles from the entrance to Rocky Mountain National Park. Now, the Stanley Hotel inspired the Overlook Hotel in Stephen King's 1977 best-selling novel, The Shining. Now, the owner died in 1940, but many believe his presence can still be seen and felt at the hotel, mainly at the bar and in the billiard room. The ghost of his wife Flora has a habit for tinkering around on the hotel's piano, according to multiple accounts. Now, the 4th floor is the most haunted, with guests hearing children's laughter in the hall with no one to be found. Down the hall in room 407, multiple guests have reported being tucked into bed by some invisible force, and others have felt someone sit on the foot of the bed only to find nothing there. In room 428, some have had the vision of a cowboy looming over the bed as they slept or standing in the corner. Now, how do all these ghosts get in there? Well, it's the portal in the hotel. When you enter the hotel, there is a staircase landing filled with paintings and mirrors facing each other. Now, if you don't know, it's said if you put 2 mirrors in front of each other, they create a portal to another world. Why would anyone place 2 mirrors in front of each other? For the portal, of course, and that's exactly what they did at the Stanley Hotel. Number 2. The Devil's Sea. In the Pacific Ocean south of Tokyo, Japan, lies a treacherous stretch of water that has been nicknamed the Devil's Sea. Due to a string of vessels and fishing boats that have disappeared, many compare it to the Bermuda Triangle. Now, the most famous of these disappearances happened in 1953 when a research fishery ship called the Kyotomoro No. 5, which consisted of 31 crew members and scientists combined, sailed into the area to investigate a recently formed volcanic island. Unfortunately, the vessel never returned from its voyage, with no traces left of it or the crew for that matter. With so many people missing there too, there has to be something else going on that they are experiencing that we don't know. And coming in at number 1 is the Nevada Triangle. Consisting of vast stretches of the desert and the Sierra Nevada mountains, this triangular area in the Silver State has made headlines in recent years due to a disappearance that occurred in 2007. The victim was an aviator adventurer named Steve Fawcett, who flew into the Nevada Triangle in a small plane and was never seen again, despite the massive search for him. But he's not the only one, as many others have disappeared before him. Some 2,000 planes have been lost in the last 60 years. In this remotely populated area of more than 25,000 miles of mountain desert, many crashes are never found. Then, of course, Area 51 is there. With the area's close proximity to Area 51, it has led some theorists to speculate the presence of UFOs in the Nevada Triangle Triangle have been responsible for some of these disappearances.
The 4D world. To start off this list, we have one idea of how other dimensions could theoretically exist in our world. Basically, right now, we as humans can observe our three-dimensional world, and depending on who you talk to, maybe we already know about the fourth dimension, although we can't see it, as many people believe the fourth dimension is space-time. We know and can physically observe the other three, which are of course length, width, and height. For anything beyond these three, we can think and conceptualize what they might be or what they might be like, but we truly have no idea what it would be like to exist inside of these other dimensions. So everything we know is 3D, but that isn't to say that there aren't other dimensions or that they can't exist. In fact, we can neither prove or disprove that they do just because we only exist in 3 dimensions. There are scientists out there who have come to the conclusion, or maybe having a hypothesis is a better way to put it, that if higher dimensions do in fact exist, it is highly likely that it would be nearly impossible for us to come in contact with them. I mean, they would have a completely different way of existing than we do, but just because we can't interact doesn't mean we can't live alongside. I guess long story short, this is just the idea that just because we can't prove it doesn't mean that disproves it, and it's just likely that we'll never know. This idea comes from a study that was conducted in 2015 at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, which sounds like a place that only the CIA or Autobots are allowed to go. Your brain's gotta be this big to get in. Anyway, this study suggested that life could have spread via panspermia, which is the hypothesis that life exists throughout the universe, distributed by space dust, meteoroids, asteroids, comets, that sort of thing. Moving star to star in clusters, scientists tested 2 possibilities for what might have brought life to Earth: asteroids and intelligent beings. These aren't the only 2 possibilities that exist, it's just the ones that they tested, but here's the thing. The researchers found that they were both possible. And to make matters worse, they would have followed the same pattern. Yeah, so good luck getting any concrete answers, you know what I mean? If correct, this study could mean that there is either life somewhere else in the galaxy, or that some other higher beings or something like that does exist. In our number 8 spot today, we have how? Okay, so this is a point that some people explain may show us that there is some sort of higher power or being or dimension involved in getting us to where we are today. I'm not saying that this is concrete proof, I'm just here regurgitating other people's ideas and theories, and you can take them and do what you want with them, okay? This is a choose your own adventure zone, I'm not telling you how to think. Basically, this is the idea that was based on certain studies which suggest that the universe shouldn't have survived more than a second. As one example, the Big Bang apparently should have created equal parts of matter and antimatter, which would then cancel each other out, but as we're all standing here, literally made up of matter, we know that that's not the case. Instead, slightly more matter was produced, which then turned into the entire observable universe. We can't definitively explain why or how this happened, which of course is exactly why people have to come up with their own theories. At this point, I mean, there has to be a reason why, but your guess is as good or probably better than mine. In our number 7 spot today, we have hyperdimension. Okay, we're not even halfway through this list and we're diving into some string theory. Buckle up, everyone. I am certainly not an expert, so it's gonna be a bumpy ride. So in string theory, there's these little loops of vibrating stringiness. In the theory, these are what are called the fundamental objects of reality, and they manifest themselves as particles like electrons and neutrinos, or the force carriers of nature like photons and gravitons. They do this through their vibrations. So what we see is a little particle, and by see, I mean we don't really see because it's so small, but what's even smaller is this vibrating stringiness that vibrates with different modes, similar to a guitar string kind of deal. So like how all strings tuned to A flat sound the same or play the same note, each vibration mode is thought to relate to a different particle. So all A flats are electrons and all E naturals are photons. Hopefully you get what I'm saying. So in string theory, particle collisions are these strings all merging together and then splitting apart. In this world, for the math to, well, math, there has to be more than 4 dimensions in our world. I'm sorry, I don't know enough about math to really fully explain this, but basically our space-time doesn't give the strings enough room or space or whatever you want to call it to do their little vibrating thing in all the ways needed for all the variety of particles in the world. Like, there's too many notes, if that makes sense. So basically this theory is suggesting that particles aren't just wiggling around, they're doing it hyperdimensionally. Right now, based on this theory, theory, some suggest as many as 10 or 11 dimensions might be necessary. In our number 6 spot today, we have logic. Back in the 1940s, Kurt Gödel, who was a physicist, tried to prove the existence of God using math, and he based this on the argument by St. Anselm of Canterbury. I thought the whole religion thing was about having faith, but truth be told, if someone could prove to me that a higher power is real, I'd be fully willing to hear them out. The argument for the saint is as follows. There is a greater being called God, and nothing greater than God can be imagined. God exists as an idea in the mind. With all other things being equal, a being that exists in both the mind and reality is better than a being that only exists in the mind. Therefore, if God only exists in the mind, then it's possible that we can imagine a being more powerful than God. However, that contradicts argument 1 because nothing greater than God can be imagined. Therefore, God exists. I'm definitely not convinced yet, but basically where Kurt comes in is that in using this modal logic in parallel universes, he argued that if an all-powerful being exists in at least one parallel universe, that means they exist. As there are an infinite number of universes with an infinite number of possibilities, one universe has a being so powerful that it would be considered an omnipotent God. Therefore, God exists. In 2013, this idea was challenged by 2 mathematicians who processed the mathematical equation that goes along with this theory on a computer, and it was found to be correct. Here is the flaw though. This doesn't prove that a God exists, it just proves that some sort of all-powerful being could exist according to modal logic. In our number 5 spot today, we have the valley. This is another theory in reference to what we were previously talking about, how some argue that the universe basically just shouldn't exist, and that in some way could lead some people to argue that this means some other dimension or being is responsible for our world. This theory has the world placed in the Higgs field, which is what gives particles their mass. The theory suggests that basically there is a large energy field that is stopping our universe from just like falling into a valley or a deeper field in which the universe wouldn't be able to exist. Okay, that sounds kind of daunting, but also nice and cozy, but based on the standard model of physics, if correct, a rapid expansion of the universe right after the Big Bang probably should have already moved the universe into this valley or deep field, which again would have destroyed it less than a second after it was created. I'm not gonna lie, this is another one that doesn't have me fully convinced, but it is still interesting to say the least. I think I'm just still hung up on trying to figure out what would be around if the universe wasn't. What the heck is the valley? Where is this field? And how could the whole universe fall? I love and hate science so much, it's the most conflicting feeling. In our number 4 spot today, we have the cylinder condition. For this theory of other dimensions, let's take a trip back to 1919, shortly after Albert Einstein. Yeah, remember that guy? Remind me to thank him for literally melting my brain while trying to research for this video. After he published his theory of general relativity, there was a mathematician and physicist named Theodore Kaluza who decided to play around with the equations within the theory just for fun. I guess that's what smart people do for fun. I just play Overcooked or Mario Party with Taylor, but I guess to each their own. So while he's just doing his Sunday crossword puzzle, he found something interesting when he added a 5th dimension to the equation. Nothing happened. The equations within the theory of relativity don't care about the number of dimensions that exist. Then, just to do some equations on master mode, Theodore decided to spice up this 5th dimension he was adding. He made it one that wrapped around itself in what was called a cylinder condition. This ended up creating a new thing that caught Theodore's attention. The equations were the usual equations of general relativity in the first 4 dimensions, but there was also a new equation that replicated the expressions of electromagnetism. This created a hypothesis that perhaps adding dimensions might, in the end, unify physics, which would kind of make sense of a few things that currently don't really. In our number 3 spot today, we have the glitch in the matrix. This is one of those ideas that makes you wonder if we are living in a simulation. Are there some other beings in a higher dimension that are playing around with us like Sims? Because if so, I got some beef with mine. According to theoretical physicist John D. Barrow, we can tell if the universe is a simulation by looking for mistakes or errors in it, and it's important to note that he also believes that even beings in these higher dimensions or an advanced civilization would not have a complete knowledge of our nature's laws. This would lead to mistakes or glitches in the matrix. The notable ones would be changes in physical constants, which are physical properties like the speed of light that are always the same everywhere throughout time. Or has it been? In 2001, there were researchers in Australia who claimed to have found evidence that the speed of light has been slowing down over the last billion years. This does contradict general relativity, and it's not something I'm ignoring, we're just talking about theories here. To further this example, astronomer John Webb discovered that light from a quasi-stellar radio source, or a quasar, which is a highly luminous object in the early universe thought to be powered by supermassive black holes, so he he found that light from one had absorbed the wrong type of photons on its 12 billion year journey to Earth. The only way this could happen is if there was a change in the speed of light or in the charge of an electron, both of which are physical constants. There are people who disagree or don't see eye to eye with this theory that these things might just prove we are living in a simulation, but regardless of that, no one is exactly sure why physical constants stay constant, but we do know that they are imperative and critical for our existence, and really for the existence of the entire universe. Some would argue that they're so fixed and important that it just might be evidence of the universe being created specifically for life. In our number 2 spot today, we have cosmic rays. In 2003, philosopher Nick Bostrom suggested that the universe is actually just a computer simulation, which, yeah, clearly we've all heard that before, so what makes this one so special? Well, he put forward the idea that, obviously, if true, this would mean that some higher beings, or being, would have had to build this simulation, but that means that the universe would have to be finite because all computers have limits. This means that maybe the simulation is detectable only if we can find the limits of the universe. To test this idea, German researchers built universe simulators on a lattice in a quantum computer, which fully sounds like a made-up sentence of fake words. During this, they focused on cosmic rays, which are atom fragments that come from outside of our solar system. They chose these because they have a finite or limited and definable amount of power, which leads to them deteriorating over time. They found that all the cosmic rays, when they reached Earth, had a similar amount of energy, a maximum of 10 electron volts. This is curious because it suggests that all the cosmic rays had similar starting points, like perhaps not so different from the edge of a simulation lattice on a quantum computer. Do you see where I'm going with this? What if we're all just one big quantum computer? I guess that would finally explain the cloud. In our number 1 spot today, we have the landscape. Okay, we're almost done talking about string theory for the day. I know I'm gonna take a nap after finishing this one. My brain just needs some peace at this point because I don't even know it's real anymore. Maybe nothing, maybe so much that I don't even know 99% of it exists. Either way, there's a chance that these dimensions we don't see or don't realize are exceptionally small and that they wrap up on themselves. And it's thought that if this were true, that every time we moved ourselves around in our 4-dimensional space, we'd be moving around these extra dimensions billions and billions of times, and these dimensions are where the strings in string theory live. After more smart people did even more math, it was realized that these 6 extra spatial dimensions that we talked about before when we were discussing how the particles or the strings that make them up need more room to vibrate, and in order to do that, they need at least 6 extra dimensions. You know, I was doing a whole guitar thing. So those extra dimensions, they have to be wrapped up in a very specific way, which is known as the Calabi-Yau manifolds. I apologize if I said that wrong. These are named after 2 very prominent physicists, but here's where things get even more chaotic than before. There isn't just one manifold that could exist. There's like 10 to the power of 200,000. As Paul Sutter on space.com put it so perfectly, quote, "It turns out that when you need 6 dimensions to curl up on themselves and give them almost any possible way to do it, it adds up." He also goes on to explain that, quote, "Each possible configuration will affect the ways the strings inside them vibrate. Since the ways that strings vibrate determine how they behave up here in the macroscopic world, each choice of manifold leads to a distinct universe with its own set of physics. So only one manifold can give rise to the world as we experience it. Unfortunately, we don't actually have an answer to that. But the good news is that string theory is always evolving. It isn't something that is finished. It's a theory. We have ways of hopefully trying to get close to the real thing, but we don't really know how right we are. Right now, the best response from string theorists is what is called the landscape. This is a multiverse of all of the possible universes as predicted by the manifolds." I feel like I'm in a really bad episode of Rick and Morty right now.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the 4th dimension. 4th dimension, okay, let's talk about the first 3 for a hot minute and then we can break our brains and wrap it up. First dimension, the x-axis, aka length, aka these arms, quite long, one-dimensional in your screen, you got it, great, awesome. Second dimension, y-axis, aka height. I'm 6'2", long arms, now I'm a 3D real person in your 2D screen. Got it, sweet. Already this is nuts. The third dimension is juicy. This is where we have to start leaning in and raising our eyebrows. The z-axis gives these objects a sense of area and cross-section like a cube. It's got length, width, and volume, all that jazz. It's the real deal at every angle. The fourth dimension, scientists believe, is time. Time is like a highway for everything. If we can navigate time and potentially go backwards, well, you know what's up. You've seen all those movies. But according to superstring theory, once we start messing with time, you start to bring in possible other worlds. Alternate worlds, alternate realities, those sound terrifying. I've seen movies, hard pass. Wake up one day and then spaghetti just doesn't exist. That's a nightmare. Put me back.
In our number 9 spot today we have Xibalba. Also referred to as the place of fright, this underworld comes from Mayan mythology. Overseen of course by the Maya death gods, Xibalba came to be in the 16th century Verapaz. The entrance to such a wonderful place was in a cave in Guatemala. Caves in Belize are actually known as the entrance to Xibalba. These water-filled caves spanning as far as 300 feet were the front door. But you can't just grab a snorkel and frog kick your way to the underworld. According to ancient Maya scripture, this path was once filled with dark obstacles, and I mean some pretty awful obstacles. A river filled with scorpions and blood, combined with houses littered with bats and pure darkness. Honestly, I would rather the bats than a river of blood. 10 times out of 10.
Number 8. Niflheimer. Ah yes, Norse mythology. We've probably heard about this dark dimension at some point in time, but Niflheimer is one of the 9 realms. This realm is specific for the dishonored, as its ruler is that of Hel, the daughter of Loki. Superhero movies are fun and all, but Thor stuff always hits a little harder because it's based on this Norse legend. Hel in this realm is not as fun as Cate Blanchett also. This historical version was described as having half her body alive and the other half a rotten corpse, and I don't want to know which side is which, to be honest. It's like a mermaid, but just all bad. You end up here if you pass away in your sleep or if you pass in an otherwise cowardly fashion. Which, side note, that would suck. You pass peacefully in your sleep with ongoing medical conditions, then you wake up here with Hel and her dragon pet named Nadog. What a mess. I'd rather have a night terror. Bye.
In our number 7 spot today we have Duzak. This realm is like the equivalent of hell in Zoroastrianism. In this religion there are many fates for those who are wicked, which include things like annihilation, purgation in molten metal, and none other than good old eternal punishment. In the Zoroastrian religion, Duzak is a place where evil souls will remain for quite some time. There are actually a few different versions of hell in this religion that all hold places for different things. One place is for evil thoughts, one is for evil words, and one is for evil people. It is said that these versions of hell smell really bad, which is kind of hilarious. They're like, you're gonna suffer, but the worst part is the smell. Apparently in some of these hellish places, it's so dark that if you find yourself there, you will think that you have lost your eyesight.
Number 6. The Egyptian Afterlife. Otherwise known as the Fields of Reeds or Fields of Offering, this is a place ancient Egyptians believed came after life. In fact, they believed that life on Earth was only a mere fraction of an eternal life. Not ending in death, but rather forever lasting in peace and harmony. Doesn't that sound wonderful, Chris? Wow. They believed there was more than the body to just failing. The soul must go on after this point. Born on Earth believing in the gods and the deities known as the Seven Hathors, once death did arrive, you're just entering another realm, but hopefully the gods have judged you, so now you can live in this paradise known as the Fields of Reed. The thing is, you don't just pass on and enter this realm where you can drink wine and then two-step with your relatives. You have to earn that spot. You gotta know the bouncer or pay cover. You're not just waltzing in here. This paradise is just a mirror image of your previous mortal life. So if you're not kind to others, this field of dreams can easily turn into a field of eternal nightmares. Sweet. Ancient Egyptians' beliefs in hell predates that of Jewish, Christian, and Islamic visions. The concept of hell in ancient Egypt predates the concept of hell in those modern religions. With the god Osiris believed to be the lord of said underworld, we have the coffin text and the Book of the Dead to study up while we're still living, like us, lousy mortals.
In our number 5 spot today we have the Upside Down. Hold on, Stranger Things fans, because you know exactly where we are going. The Upside Down is an alternate dimension that exists parallel to the human world. Basically, every living thing that exists in the Upside Down are all linked together in a sort of hive mind situation, and they are all controlled by the Mind Flayer. It is here, in the Upside Down, where the species of humanoid predators were born, the Demogorgons. It isn't exactly clear how this dimension came to be, but it is thought that the origins of it also relate back to the Mind Flayer. Who is the Mind Flayer other than the entity who rules the evil parallel dimension? Well, he is an extremely powerful being who is on a conquest to take over the world. He has been known to do things like fry humans and rats, feeding them chemicals and melting their bodies into a pile of biomass, which would then be used to create a new body for itself to then take over the world. Yeah, I don't want to go to this guy's house for coffee, let alone live in his weird evil world. Hard pass on that one.
Number 4. Tartarus. For this next one, we're dipping into the Greek underworld. According to Greek mythology, I'm talking way back in 1700 BC, Tartarus was a deep abyss, a dungeon really, full of torture and suffering. Lovely. This place full of suffering of course resides in Hades. Hades is a realm where the dead go after their time. It doesn't mean that it's a fiery abyss per se, but that's where Tartarus comes into play. That's where the underworld devil theme, fire and hell stuff, that's where it kicks in. In the Gorgias, Plato wrote about these souls of the dead and how they were judged after they had crossed the river of the dead. Now, if you weren't a great human being, you of course were judged as so, and subsequently you were sent to Tartarus. In Greek poet Hesiod's Theogony, Tartarus was an offspring of Aether and Gaia. It was a person, a real thing. They were the third of the primordial deities. Even Zeus mentioned this place in the Iliad. Zeus states that the Tartarus is far beneath Hades as heaven is high above earth. Hashtag facts, you heard it from Zeus himself.
In our number 3 spot today we have NRAA. NRAA is the hell that exists within Jain cosmology. It is the realm of existence that holds great suffering, but it's different from some of the other hells as we know them. Part of this difference stems from the fact that you don't go here as a result of divine judgment and punishment, but rather as a direct result of one's previous karma. Another reason why it differs is because of the fact that one's stay here isn't for all of eternity. It's still a super long time, as it's usually measured in billions of years, but I guess a super long time is slightly better than forever. It would kind of suck to have to move after a billion years though. At that point, I feel like you'd have probably made a nice little cozy spot for yourself. Anyway, the length of your time here is dependent on when the karma has been rebalanced.
Number 2. Diyu. According to Chinese mythology, Diyu has been described as a literal maze. Influenced by Buddhism, the 10 courts of hell are actually pretty loaded when it comes to accommodation. The Jade Emperor originally put Yama in charge of watching over Diyu. Now Diyu is where the souls go right after death initially, but it's not where they're held. It's not like a dark realm per se, but it is home to 12,800 hells right below Earth. So there's more than one. There's 8 dark hells, 8 cold hells, and 84,000 other hells at the end of the universe. It depends how long you stay in Diyu, of course, depending on what sin you've committed, but like I said, it's an actual maze. Each level of this dark realm corresponds to different sins. For example, if you were a gossiping Gale, in Diyu you would have your tongue torn out. Infidelity, well, say goodbye to your fingers. And if you took somebody else's life, a spot for you is reserved specifically on the mountain made of knives, which is not a comfortable sleep if you didn't put that together.
In our number 1 spot today we have hell. We have of course got to talk about the classic Christian interpretation of hell. Old Faithful, one might call it. No one's calling it that, but anyway, the Christian fiery underworld is full of the suffocating smell of brimstone and demons that have a hierarchy and an answer to Satan himself. There are rivers of fire or scalding water, a ton of snakes, and just general bad vibes. Truly, it just sucks, and it's apparently super hot down there. The worst part? It's not particularly difficult to get here, if it really does exist. In fact, if this version of hell actually exists and you gotta play by the Christian rules in order to stay away, most of us here right now are probably gonna see each other there. The next worst part? This is one evil place that once you're in, you're not getting out.
Number 10, Suzanne Brown. If you're looking for a lover who is out of this world, think again if you're gonna take notes from Suzanne Brown. UFOologist and author Carl Negatis revealed that a woman under the pseudonym Suzanne Brown was visited repeatedly by an alien from 1965 to 1989. The creature's name was Myriko and stood 150 centimeters tall with long blonde hair and a skin-tight suit. She was first visited by this entity when she was only 12 and described their relationship as pure friendship. She visited the inside of the spaceship once and recalled the image of seeing small, gray, ageless infants. Then Susan grew up and got married, though sadly that didn't last long. But it wasn't only her marriage that took a turn for the worse, Myriko got a lot darker. He controlled her mind and forced her to participate in intimate relationships with strangers. A month later, she discovered that she was pregnant, and then a month after that, she awoke with terrible abdominal pains, with Myriko in the room. Susan mysteriously miscarried, but soon Myriko returned to her. He took her to the spaceship and showed her a gray infant that she somehow knew was hers. Thankfully, the visits eventually stopped, but Susan has endured the nightmares ever since.
Number 9. Action Comics. What's up, nerds? Hello again. With all these new superhero movies coming out, they all share a similar theme, the theme of a multiverse in some way, shape, or form. But what if comic books actually predicted the future, or an alternate future? Back in 1944, a year before the Hiroshima bombing, Action Comics published this issue. The super adventure has Lex Luthor and investing this bomb powered by, you guessed it, nuclear energy. The US government actually reached out to them in private. They're like, hey, you don't know any of this, you shouldn't know any of this, don't publish this, don't post it. Hey, delete that tweet. Right quick, thank you. Their comic was so accurate that the government asked them to delay the issue. A year later, America dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, John Byrne, famous comic book writer, is pretty much known for all his comics seemingly coming true in real life. So this is not the first time this has happened. He wrote an issue for DC Comics where Superman saves a space crew after it explodes after launching, and then the Challenger tragedy sadly took place. The Simpsons do that as well. It's creepy. Stop showing us our future. No spoilers. Thanks.
Alright, number 8, Bloody Mary. Okay, we're getting a little crazy here, okay? Bear with me, but think about it for a second. The story I knew growing up, and am still scarred by to this day, is that you have to say her name 3 times, flicking the light switch on and off, and she will appear in the mirror, and maybe you'll die. I don't know. She was the #1 reason why I chose to like hold it over ever going to the girls' washroom alone. True story. Now, granted, some people were just pranksters and got lucky that she never showed up. But somewhere out there, someone has experienced the real deal, which means someone has encountered an interdimensional mirrorverse traveling ghost. Her intentions, whether benign or malevolent, have yet to be confirmed. But one thing is for sure, everyone has a story, which means at some point, this divine spirit of a higher dimension was in 2 or 10 places at once. So that's power far beyond my reach.
Number 7. Project Pegasus and the Chrononauts. Back in 2011, 2 men, Andrew D. and William Stillings, came forward and just announced that they were in fact these chrononauts who previously worked with DARPA in a program named Project Pegasus, something they had kicked off back in the 70s, and then come 1980, so they were there for a while, come 1980 they were taking an arms training class. And no, an arms? What? No, I meant to say Mars. They were taking a Mars training class. A Mars training class. That's not Matt Damon farming potatoes. It's a little more jazzy than that, a little more futuristic. They were picked to go to Mars, and you know who else was? A young man named Barry Soetoro, who we know in the current universe as Barack Obama. Yeah. The way they were training to go to Mars also wasn't like NASA. They didn't spin you around until you blacked out. They didn't get shot into space via rocket. They were actually gearing up to use teleportation as means of travel. They referred to it as a jump room. The White House actually came forward and said that Barack Obama has not been to Mars, which just hearing that sentence with zero context is amazing. That's so funny. Maybe this is another dimension. Maybe they're saying they're going to Mars, but really the gang plus Barry Barack Soetoro was warping to an alternate dimension. Or they could fast travel to Mars, which, I mean, sure, it's kind of boring. I don't know. Your head explodes, I think.
Number 6, Cat Queen. Meow, am I right? Simon Parkes thought so. Parkes, a city councillor for Stakesby in the UK, claimed he had an intimate relationship with an entity called Cat Queen. In 2013, Parkes revealed the relationship and claimed that he even fathered a daughter called Zarka with his alien mistress. But apparently this wasn't the first time he had encountered an ET. He has stories going way back to the time when he was like 6 months old, which is honestly so impressive. I'm glad I don't remember anything, if I'm being honest. He remembers long green hands reaching into his crib, and he was like, that's not my mom. When he was just 6, he encountered a green creature only 210 centimeters tall wearing a purple robe. This was to be his cat queen who would grow to be his aforementioned lover. He now visits her spaceship 4 times a year to see her and their offspring. Parkes has a human wife, and this strange relationship has put a strain on the marriage, but they're working on it together. However, his work life is less strained. In fact, here is a quote from Parkes himself saying, "I get more common sense out of the aliens than out of the Scarborough Town Hall. The aliens are far more aware of stuff. People in the town hall seem not to be aware of the needs of Whippy at all. Priorities, I guess. Space, time, travel."
Number 5. Flight towards reality. Senior Royal Air Force Commander Sir Robert Victor Goddard had the flight of his life back in 1935. He wrote a book about this, so buckle up. It was 1935, like I've said 5 times already. Hey, you know what year it was? It was 1935, it was crazy. Goddard was flying over the RAF station Drem over Scotland, and the station at this point in time was no longer in operation. Right after World War I, it was abandoned pretty much immediately. He of course knew this, being an experienced pilot and all. Now during this flight, a storm hit and he was having a hard time just keeping his plane in the air. It was intense. Now we saw that airfield briefly through the clouds, and this time it was lively. He even spotted planes around, but when the storm continued to knock him about, his next glimpse, it was back to normal. Now, 4 years after this, that airfield did in fact make a comeback. So perhaps he slipped into an alternate dimension where the field was never left to rot, or he caught a glimpse of his own future in the clouds. He titled the book Flight Towards Reality, and honestly, I'm gonna add this one to my list because that's an insane story.
Number 4, Loris Capilla, a holy encounter, or aliens. Either way, this next one came from somewhere other than Earth. Loris Capilla was assistant to Pope John the 23rd, and one night in July of 1961, they saw something they would never forget. They were taking a walk together through the Castel Gandolfo Gardens when all of a sudden they saw an incredibly bright star, and it was getting closer. Soon, a craft covered in blue and amber lights landed right in front of them. Loris recounts, and I quote, "A strange being came out of it. He seemed like a human except that he was surrounded by golden light and had large elongated ears." Thinking they were witnessing the divine, they fell to their knees in prayer. After a few moments, the Pope got up and walked over. For 20 minutes, they had a telepathic conversation as only the Pope's responses could be heard. The only thing His Holiness said to Loris after the being left was that the children of God are everywhere and sometimes we have difficulty recognizing our own brothers. This honestly feeds my theory that a whole bunch of angels in the Bible were actually aliens, and I'm really excited about it.
Number 3. Gadianton Canyon. Back in 1972, 4 women were driving back to Utah. They were heading back after a Saturday rodeo, which sounds like a wonderful time, hashtag FOMO. They were crossing the Utah-Nevada state line around 10 p.m., but they hit a fork in the road and they decided to go left. They drove through what's called Gadianton Canyon, where the black cement that they were driving on turned white all of a sudden while they were in the middle of the road, and it was just, they were swerving around. They turned around obviously, but it wasn't a highway anymore in a canyon. It was just fields and grain. In fact, not a desert at all. This is where things get a little spacey. They stopped in a tavern asking for directions, but shit hit the fan when 4 egg-shaped vehicles mounted on tricycle wheels with headlights on top started to chase after them. They drove back with these egg aliens on their tail, and when they got back to the original road, and at this point they had 3 flats, they were out of breath, they were scared, they were hauling ass, obviously. So they stuck around until morning to ask a state trooper for help, but just as you probably are thinking right now, he was a little bit skeptical. They checked the tire tracks and it checks out. Weirdly enough, they stopped right after 200 meters into that same desert, and then the car is just nowhere to be seen. Was this a parallel universe with Mario Kart alien vehicles? Were these aliens just visiting us? I have so many questions that I'm not sure I even want the answer to.
Alright, number 2, the Fatima Mystery. In 1917, 3 children apparently saw an apparition of the Virgin Mary in a field. Their vision prompted 70,000 people to visit the same sheep pasture and stated that they saw a spinning silver disc in the sky. They received 3 messages from the spirit in the sky. The third was kept a secret by the Vatican for years. The first message/vision was of hell. The 3 children say they only saw a flash, but it was almost unbearable. I like how it was almost unbearable, so that implies that it was bearable, which is okay. Alright. The second message predicted that World War I would end, which was happening around the time, but another even larger war would begin. And third, it was so groundbreaking it was placed in an envelope and wasn't opened until 1960. It was revealed to the public in 2000 and apparently predicted the assassination of a pope. Just which one, we aren't sure. But there was one more thing they left behind. The children heard them say, "We are here, we have been since thousands of years ago, and they will return again."
And finally, number 1. Paintings. A painting from the 15th century by artist Domenico Ghirlandaio titled The Madonna with Saint Giovanni is currently in the Hall of Hercules in Palazzo Vecchio in Florence. The painting shows the Virgin Mary, infant Jesus, and Saint John the Baptist, but we can see this object in the background and it's for sure a UFO. What's even more interesting is that there's a man in the background that's looking up in the sky at this object. He's even shielding his eyes from like the sun to get a better look. That's crazy. And his dog's barking at it. A guy painted this. Took him like 4 months to paint this. This is incredible. Art historians believe the flying saucer is indeed an angel, others like me believe aliens, and others think it's a future version of us visiting our past and we just happened to photobomb Domenico. There's also evidence of the underworld in tons of paintings from the past. 1475, St. Wolfgang and the Devil, neat. The Baptism of Christ, 1710, didn't know we had lasers back then, looks like quite the rave. Festival headliners, the 3 wise men, nice, debit. Paintings hold the key to multi-dimensional travel, people, so grab a paintbrush, start getting creative. So do we want to visit these alternate dimensions, or?
Not even a little bit.
Not a bit. Well, what about Bloody Mary? That's kind of fun.
No, don't say that.
Don't say
blood.
I shouldn't say Bloody Mary?
Don't say that, because that's a mirror technically.
It's a camera.
Yeah, but it's also, it looks like a mirror when we look into it.
It's legally a mirror, you're right. More than
yeah, it's legally a mirror.